Put your knee down. Okay. Knee down. Knee has to be down.
Yeah, turn my phone off.
Now. Knee down. Well done. Get your ugly face out of it.
Good evening. Is that working? Yep. Yes.
Just about.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Waterstones, Glasgow City Hall Street. We know our humble little bookshop is as excited as you all must be to welcome tonight's guest. Just a few quick announcements. They're a bit boring, so we'll get there. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, so if you do hear one, it's not a drill. If you could just leave via the mark.
Well, you're back on now. Brilliant.
Yay.
We can hear you now. Fantastic.
Via the marked exits. There's one in each corner of the room, so if you just go there calmly, please don't run. Bernard is happy for folks to take photos during the event, but if you could just make sure that the flash is turned off, and if you could also make sure that your mobiles are on silent. Please also note that tonight Bernard will only be able to sign copies of his new book chapters and verses. If you do need to purchase a copy of his book, then you will be able to do so after the Q&A. Tonight Bernard will be interviewed by the Herald journalist Teddy Jameson, and then we'll accept a few questions from you, the audience.
Oh, good.
I would be lying if I said that I'd grown up listening to Bernard's music, because I fear that it's just a little bit before my time, but I know that some of you must have, and I can imagine how special this night would be for many of you.
Yeah.
Here to introduce Mr. Sumner then is someone far more befitting to do it than me. That's tonight's interviewer from the Herald, Teddy Jameson.
Come on, Teddy! Whoever Teddy is.
Yes, I'm old enough. Yeah, just a question. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Waterstones in this special event.
Good, we're getting to the next thing.
As Anton said, my name is Teddy Jameson. I'm a writer for the Herald and the Sunday Herald, and it's my real pleasure and privilege to chair this event tonight. The format will be, we'll have a chat for 45 minutes, then we'll throw it open to you.
Excellent.
And you can ask questions, and I guess you'll have to wait for the mics so that everyone can hear you. I don't really need to interview or introduce Bernard, do I? I wouldn't have thought so. Suffice to say, he's been in two of the finest bands of the last, 35 years. He was also in Joy Division New Order, of course, just for those electronic and bands out there.
Very good.
What I will do is introduce the book, chapter and verse. You might say, well, do we really need another Factory book, another New Order book, another Joy Division book? I think we do when it comes from someone who's at the heart of the story. And Bernard's book is hugely entertaining, very, very readable. It kind of takes us from post-war Salford to 21st century. It's a story about friendship, family, falling out. It's a story about loss and grief, about legacies. It's a story about hedonism, high times and low times at the Hacienda. It's a story that takes some curious diversions. You will learn, if you read it, about Bernard's love of Powell and Pressburger films, which is a good thing. The time he took Quincy Jones to Knutsford, which is a strange thing. The reason why you should never get in a car that Bez is driving. And there's also a wonderful story in which involves Johnny Marr, airport security, and a green bag full of a kind of regurgitated material that I don't want to go into too much detail, but the memory lingers for a few days after you've read that. Even so, it's a very Moorish book, and why don't we introduce the guy behind it? So please put your hands together for Bernd Sumner, author of this book. Thanks a lot.
That's nice, it's quite cool. It's not really right.
Hello, Glasgow.
Hello, Bernard!
Yeah, it's very nice to be here. I hope I can fill you in with a bit of detail about my book.
Where does the word author sound, anyway?
I'm not really an author, I'm a part-time author, full-time musician. I've written this book really because I've reached that point in my life where I've probably got more years behind me than I've got ahead of me, and I thought, grab the chance while you can. So the time just felt right, and I thought there's a lot of questions that journalists haven't asked me, you know. they usually ask about the product rather than the person. And I think my book's about the people and me who made the music that I presume you all like. Yeah, it's about what makes me tick, and what makes me tick made my contribution towards the story of Joy Division and New Order. I'm not obviously. I gave a description of the other guys and girls in the band as well.
Well, before we get there, let's begin.
Sounds like Jimmy Savile then, doesn't it?
Did
Guys?
you?
Guys and girls.
It's not a good sign.
Men and women.
You need to edit it out that bit. Let's begin with childhood, because I think that's in many ways some of the most freshest bits of the book are the bits that none of us really know about. I didn't know about it, anyway, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
It's the sense of you growing up in this post-war Salford, which is, 20 years, not even 20 years after the war, and you can still see the kind of pockmarks of what happened. Describe the world in which you grew up.
I grew up in industrial Salford at that time, and it was pretty much like you see on Coronation Street, red brick tenements, no trees, no gardens, loads of factories spewing out chemicals into the air, but it was absolutely fantastic, and I wouldn't change anything if I went back, because it was a laugh growing up there. There was a strong sense of community, which I think it's a cliche, but I think we miss that sense of community today, and there was a kind of a sense of tribalism, and I mean that in a good way, where I grew up, and it was a fun place to grow up, although at times, as described in the book, it could be pretty dangerous. But you're from Glasgow, so it's yeah. I mean, it's nothing to you, but yeah. There were a couple of occasions in the book where I did get chased by a gang with swords, sabres from the Crimean War, and it's a bit left out because I didn't want to over-egg it about being chased by a gang with spears. But that only happened to me once. It probably happens on a weekly basis in Glasgow.
Indeed. Well,
Does it?
All the time. Tell us a little bit about your mother, because that was a difficult relationship, I think.
Well, that's the first bit we tackled in the book. My mother was brought up. My father disappeared before I was born, which I feel absolutely nothing about, actually. It doesn't faze me in any way whatsoever, because obviously you don't miss what you've never had. Didn't faze me. But so I was brought up with my mother and my grandparents, and well, it was a sin of hideous dimensions to be a single mother, single parent in the 1960s. And also my mother had cerebral palsy, which made it even more difficult. She was born okay, and had convulsions as a baby when she was 3 weeks old. So there were other health issues in my family as well. Too heavy to repeat here, but it was a difficult thing to tackle in the book because there was very, very strong health issues, and it's not something, it's quite a difficult subject to tackle, really. And that was the first thing we tackled because we knew it was going to be difficult, and yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting...
Can I just say we, because can I just explain about the writing process? I did write the book with another writer called Charlie Connolly, who was a guy who wrote a book called Attention All Shipping, And another book of his that I read is called And Did Those Feet, where he recreates historic walks through Great Britain. And I was such a fan of his books that I wrote him a fan letter. And I've never done that before, or to anyone or since, but I really thought he wrote really warm books. So I sent him a fan letter since we became friends. And so when I wanted to write this book, I thought I could do it quick because of my touring commitments with New Order. I thought I needed some help, and so I turned to Charlie. But the way in which we wrote it was not like, I didn't want it to be like a celebrity perfume or scent, and I didn't want someone to create something and I went, it smells nice, I'll put my name on that. And the publishers were very keen for it to be sensibly keen for it to be in my own words. So the process was that Charlie would travel up from London and he'd slap a dictaphone. We'd agree on something to talk about. He'd slap a dictaphone on the table. Then I was expecting an interview, but he didn't interview me. He just didn't say anything. So he left me to free will talk for 2 or 3 hours, which put me on the spot a bit. And then he would maybe ask me one question, and he just zipped up. So I don't think it was done in a traditional ghostwriter way.
No, I must try that.
Yeah, and then the next day we'd transcribe what I said, and then I'd take the transcription and I would study that and edit it and go, well, I didn't mean that, that's the wrong sequence of events. So that's just how we wrote the book, and that's why I say we. Check Charlie's books out as well.
Sumner, a perfume, yeah. I think there's some mileage in that, though. It's a good name. I wanted to ask about your mum and about the background, because at one point in the book you do say that explicitly that you see the world that you grew up in kind of leading explicitly to the music that Joy Division produced, or what you produced in Joy Division.
Sure, because the world you grow up in makes the man, and the man makes the music, So people ask me, journalists, what were your influences that influenced your contribution towards the music of Joy Division? And my influences were 3 different areas. One was growing up in Salford and the kind of family that I had and the illness within that family, which shaped me and also made me a bit tougher. I wasn't scarred by growing up with the difficulties that I had within my family, but I was toughened by it, so it made me stronger and more able to deal with things when they went wrong. It also made me a little bit hard of heart, which, I was quite a soft kid, and it kind of made me a bit harder, which I kind of regret that side. The other thing is, obviously the environment, growing up in an industrial environment, it wasn't just industrial, it was a decaying industrial environment. And I know you've experienced that with the Clyde shipbuilding industry here in Glasgow, and it was the same in Manchester. And there was that initial wave of industry crumbling and people losing their jobs, and you're seeing this decaying, just visibly, a decaying landscape. Like here will be shipyard cranes that are no longer used. Where I lived, it was factories that were no longer, the machines were no longer operating, smashed windows. And as a child growing up, you realise that there's something wrong, but you don't know what it is, so that has an effect on you. Then we got the second wave of good old Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, who stripped the rest out. What was remaining she got rid of. That affected me. But also my record collection affected me like anyone else. But strangely I wasn't interested in music until I was 16. And then suddenly it was like a switch had gone and I was obsessed by music. And then my record collection came into play, yeah.
And punk came along as well, and that was quite a...
Yeah, but there was a period before punk that was influential as well that I feel I must talk about. It wasn't like I was in a dark room and someone switched the light on and it was Johnny Rotten, and suddenly it just wasn't. I'd be a liar if I said that was the case. What got me interested in music was my mother bought me two things, and she did me a great favour. She bought me an electric guitar, which I bought because it looked good and it was a nice colour, and then I put it in the corner of the room because when I tried to play it, it really hurt my fingers. And learning an electric guitar without an amplifier and without anyone, a band to play with, was a pretty unrewarding experience, you know, because I didn't know where to start. And it sounded crap without an amplifier. The second thing she bought was a record player. When she bought me the record player, suddenly I needed things to play on the record player. I just wanted a record player because I like looking at it and I like the way it went round. Really, I'm not joking, I was a very visual person and it looked like an interesting machine. But then I had to buy music to go on it, so I started listening to the radio and I got into T-Rex and buying Ride Out Swan. And another thing happened was that the spaghetti western films came out, and I was very taken by these films because it might be hard to look back now and see them as revolutionary, but at the time you'd have like John Wayne films where John Wayne was the goodie and all the Indians were the baddies, and he shot all the Indians, you know, and it was totally predictable and dumb. And then Sergio Leone came along with his Italian-made and directed films where nobody at all was good, everyone was bad. That kind of was that kind of got to me, really, and the way it was directed visually, as I say, I was a visual person, was fascinating to watch. The way that it was just huge faces on the screen, you know, and there was a craft to it, an obvious craft to it, which there hadn't been in films that I'd seen before. And of course, then musically, the wonderful soundtracks that Ennio Morricone, and I think that's the key name really, Ennio Morricone put together. And I went out and I bought a fistful of dollars, and for a few dollars more, the vinyl soundtracks to those films, and was blown away by them, and that flipped the switch, you know. Can I just say as well, there was a strong culture of music at the school I went to, which was Salford Grammar School. I went to a youth club called North Salford Youth Club, and that had two rooms. It had a sports room and it had two music rooms downstairs where they played Tamla Motown, Stax and reggae and ska, and upstairs where they played like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, I guess, and Free and all the Stones and all music from rock music from that period. So I had a dual influence of two rooms, yeah. And that all came about roughly when I was about 16.
16, yeah. Well, let's jump forward a bit and talk about Joy Division and about, tell me the moment when the four of you realised that you had something special.
Probably when Ian died. No, probably during some live performances, because Joy Division to us was always a live band, and we did have something live. We didn't really know what it was, but it used to leave audiences impressed, shall we say, and yeah, live.
You didn't actually like the sound of Unknown Pleasures, did you?
I wouldn't say I don't like it. I'd say it's not the sound how we sounded live. You know, to us, we had a lot more power live and a lot more aggression and energy, and that was lost on Unknown Pleasures, but replaced with something else, which it was replaced with Martin Hannett's vision of what we were. But it wasn't what I'd been hearing the past 2 years on stage. Yeah, we were much wilder live, but Martin replaced it with his production, which was a more of an ethereal sound.
mean, you say in the book that Ian's lyrics were too, the quote is too bloody personal to kind of, you didn't pay attention in a way to them. Which seems strange to me, but I mean, is that
We didn't pay attention to each other really. I mean, it's nothing but when, say we'd go out to a pub, we'd just buy ourselves drinks, we wouldn't buy around. But that's the way just everyone did stuff in Salford, you know. I remember when we got Rob Gretton, our manager, came down and for his first meeting, we said, well, should we go to the pub to talk about it? We went to the pub. Rob's from a different part of Manchester called Wythenshawe, and we went to the pub and all bought ourselves a drink. We didn't buy Rob one and sat down. Rob thought we were being weird with him and giving him like a cold shoulder, but that was just... it's probably the way to do things, actually. We're just...
do you buy around now?
What was that?
Do you buy around now?
Would I buy around now?
There's only 90 people.
Yeah, I'd probably buy one now. Yeah, but I'd stand at the back so that you know that thing where you sort of nudge yourself to the back so you don't have to.
The situation with Ian is obviously a difficult one. There is a story in the book, and I think you've talked about this before, is that this idea of you, after his first suicide attempt, you walked him through a graveyard in an attempt to kind of, I don't know, get through to him and what actually might have happened.
Yeah, I think we all tried, to be fair, to... Ian first attempted suicide possibly 3 weeks to a month before he actually committed suicide. And, you know, you just think, oh, it's a cry for help. And I'd have to explain the build-up. The build-up was that he got epilepsy really bad on the way home from a gig that we did in London. He had a grand mal fit in the car and started lashing out in the car. We had to pull over on the hard shoulder. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning near Luton, and we had to hold him down, and we didn't know what was going on because we were only like 21. And we took him to hospital and they said he's had a fit. And after that he had it really bad, and sometimes would have a fit on stage, but not all the time. And the treatment that they were given, he was given in those days was just to nail him down really with heavy barbiturates. I know a lot of musicians probably do that out of choice, but Ian didn't, you know, and it changed his personality. I'll never say he was normal because none of us are we? He was. He became more emotionally volatile, so that one minute he'd be laughing and the next minute he'd be on the edge of tears, you know, and it made his job very, very hard because you're out there on a stage with loads of flashing lights, loads of people watching you, and knowing that at any time you could have a fit, and we, you know, it made things very difficult for him. And then I'm sure everyone knows the story, but he got involved in a relationship with a girl called Anique Honore, who sadly died a couple of months ago. And he was also married with a young baby, but his head was all over the place, you know, anyway, through illness. And all these things contributed to just tearing him apart, you know, really. I'm not suggesting that anyone with epilepsy would end up like Ian. I think it was just that he had his relationship problems, and he also had these drugs that they were giving him. I don't know what they were, but they really affected him. Plus, he was quite a volatile person. It was really nice to be around, really polite, but his way of dealing with something that annoyed him was quite explosive. but not in a violent way. He wasn't a violent man. He would just kind of freak out, you know. I remember him freaking out once because he didn't realise that in hotels you got charged about, 3 times the current rate to use the phone. And he'd been phoning his wife and drummed up. I think we got paid £10 a gig. We got paid £10 to do a gig each, and his phone bill was £15. So he freaked out at Rob, completely freaked out, as if it was his fault, But yeah.
So
he was explosive
Explosive,
with his way in
yeah.
dealing things. The drugs that he was on made him extremely volatile emotionally, vulnerable emotionally.
What I wanted to ask was, so there's this terrible tragic event where he kills himself. How did that impact on the other 3 of you? You're, as you say, you're really very young to be dealing with that.
Shock, really. Even though we tried it once, we just thought it was a cry for help, like I said earlier. And it was a kind of demonstration. We thought that it was kind of an act and a demonstration. And when I say demonstration, I mean like a crowd demonstrates in the street about something. And we never thought he'd go through with it. He took a load of pills and drank a load of whiskey. He explained to me later that and then he called an ambulance. He told me later that he called an ambulance because he'd heard that if he didn't take enough of these pills, whatever they were, probably barbiturates, that you'd end up with brain damage, So he was serious about it, I believe, but you only know that in retrospect. When he killed himself, we were all in a state of shock and depression and sadness and just... and it has to be said as well, a certain amount of anger that he'd done it, that he'd not sought a more sensible way out of his problems, because it's not a solution, is it? It's never doing that kind of thing is a solution. I'm sure, there's better ways of getting out of a tricky situation,
Was there any sense that the 3 thought, we can't go on?
No, never for 1 minute, really, because we had no alternative. We had to go on because there was no way of stopping. We'd all given up our jobs, and we didn't have any other option. Also, we'd had a taste of honey in that we really liked being in a band and making music and getting that audience response and playing live and travelling around and having fun, So to go back to a normal job was never really an option there.
How did you respond then when you came and stepped forward and then became the front man in New Order? How did you react to that? In the book you're suggesting that Ian struggled with being front and centre, as it were.
Yeah. My mic handling technique wasn't very good. I did in that part of me wanted to do it, part of me didn't want to do it. I like a challenge, because that's how you learn, if you're given a challenging situation, that's how you make yourself better, by overcoming the challenge. So I like the idea of becoming a singer. I just didn't really realise what was involved. It's a bit like writing a book, really. And it was also hard to learn in public, and it was quite a steep learning curve because I wasn't really a wordy person. I was an oral and visual person. If you're writing music, it's a really different part of your brain than if you're writing lyrics and a vocal, because the music is abstract. It's probably about the only art form where it is purely abstract. All music, all instrumental music is abstract art. But then when you come to write a vocal and you're writing words that have to be about something or convey something, it becomes literal. And that was the difficult, that's what I found difficult. And also the band went from being a really successful cult band to commercially really quite big and successful, and I didn't quite expect that. So at first I found it difficult. I couldn't sing, you know, I'd not had any singing lessons and never had a desire in my life ever to sing, so it caught me by surprise. We lost our producer Martin and I had no vocal coaching, so I was learning on the records, which wasn't really an ideal situation, but that's the way we did it, you know. Hey, that's sometimes that's how you got to do things.
It worked, obviously.
Yeah, learning on the hoof, you know. Yeah.
What did success smell like, taste like, feel like?
Well, we never really did it to be successful. We did it to have a good time. We didn't really.
Anyway, though.
We didn't want to be famous. We had no desire to become famous. We weren't greedy. We didn't care about money. We just wanted to travel around the world. But being allowed to be teenagers, adolescents forever, you know, and just enjoy the fun aspect of it, the social aspect of it, and meet nice people, cool people, go to really good clubs and make music. That's all we cared about, really. We didn't want to really think about chart success or fame, because with it, I think we realised that with that, responsibility came. And we joined a group to get away from responsibility. If we'd have gone on a standard record label who were pushing us for hits, and then we had a couple of hits and they were pushing us for more hits and putting the pressure on us, then and we had a certain amount of fame, that would bring responsibility. We joined a group so we didn't have to be responsible. You know, we didn't want to grow up.
I suppose the responsibility came anyway with the Hacienda, the financial impact of that on the band. You're basically financing that particular nightclub.
Responsibility came with our first tax bill, actually. And there was a Scottish man involved, that's certainly Mr. Monroe. So, what happened was, Joy Division we sold quite a lot of records in America, and our American record label, which I believe was Rough Trade America, went bust without paying us any money. And we were called in at the tax office, the whole band and Rob and Mr. Monroe, and he was the bad cop, and his assistant, who was the not quite so bad cop, asked for the money that we owed. We owed about, I think it was 300 or 600 grand, but we'd not received any money. We had to pay tax on that amount, but we'd not received any money off the record company because they'd gone bust. And Rob said, well, our accountant advised us that we only had to pay tax on money received, and we'd not received the money. And Mr. Monroe went, no, that's not how it works. And you have to pay the tax you owe me, else, you know, we're going to take the houses off you. It got to the point where we had to go through everything in the house and list anything of value you own, and we're going to call the bailiffs in. So obviously that was when we started to grow up a little. And also, I might add, the accountant that advised us did a runner and disappeared overnight. And Rob got a private detective to track him down. It took about 5 years, but we did eventually track him down. But we beat Mr. Monroe because we got a really clever lawyer called Paddy Grafton Green. He was a tax lawyer. By this time we got involved in the Hacienda, and he told Mr. Monroe to stop bullying his band stop using his bully boy tactics, and he said, oh, and by the way, before you leave, and there's the door, he said, I'm going to write all the money they owe you against the Hacienda, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So we did what Al Capone couldn't do. And there was a few bit of that going on after, so we I won't say we didn't get away with it, because the story's true. We never received any of the money. You know, we lost an awful lot of money, but Mr. Monroe didn't get his pounds, shillings and pence.
Did you enjoy going to Hacienda?
Going to the Hacienda? Yeah, bloody hell, yeah. Right, I did. Yeah, I've got to say, going there was great. Owning it was another matter. The period where I went was really the acid house period, and I used to go with Happy Mondays and all that crowd, and we used to sit in a little alcove at the corner, and we used to go on a Thursday, Friday and a Saturday. By Saturday things were getting pretty messy, and yeah, it was fantastic. It was fantastic, but it took a while to become fantastic, because when it first opened, no one came, you know. It was a bit like that film, Field of Dreams. Build it, but they didn't come. They did eventually, but that's when Acid House happened, you know, and it became... Originally we envisaged it as a sort of 50% venue, 50% dance club, and in the end it became about 25% venue, 75% dance club, and it worked eventually. But the trouble was, it was so big. I mean, it held about 1,850 people, something like that, that you had to have it full every single night of the week for it to work, you know. It was full on a Thursday, Friday and a Saturday, but the deals that the factory had done with the owners of the building were really bad, and we couldn't, it was like a payday loan, you know. They eventually had the great idea of buying the building and did an even worse deal. So they just made the situation even more difficult, you know.
And then the gangsters come along. I'm aware time's running on, so you go in some detail to the fallout between yourself and Peter Hook. I don't want to kind of cast that out again, but what I wanted to ask was, is that situation so raw that you can't really think about it, or is there some sense of regret that someone who was your friend for a long, long time is no longer?
Well, we didn't sack him, can I just say that? He tried to sack the band in a way, because he declared that the band had split up without speaking to us, and it's not a very nice thing to do after 30 years. Is there regret? If God, I've got to be very guarded about what I say. If you're in a bad marriage for 30 years, and then you eventually split up and enter a happy marriage, do you regret the bad marriage? No, you don't really. There were some good times, but I think really we reached... Whoa, he's a very competitive person, I'm not. And we're just very, very different people. Very, very, very different people. And just perhaps as simple as us being incompatible together, you know. Yeah, what can I say?
That's more than enough. What have you learned about yourself writing a book?
What have I learned about myself? I don't want to become an author. It's too much like bloody hard work. But yeah, I think I'll stick to music. I don't know, I guess it's been a bit like therapy really. and it's forced me to talk about things that I didn't really want to talk about. However, I feel that I've answered some questions in the book that journalists haven't asked me, and I think it's valid from that point of view. I've tried to detach myself somewhat from the, what's going on, to try and take a bird's eye view of what happened and trying to make an accurate record of the story without without any bullshit, and just try and be as truthful as possible about it. What I've learned about myself, not much, strangely. You would expect, a sort of cathartic answer that, it's been a road to Damascus moment and revisiting all that, but no. But I guess I've just set my life down on record, and I just feel at an age ready to do that. And some people say I've had an interesting life.
I would say so. Did Quincy Jones like Knutsford?
Oh, Knutsford.
Of all the places you could
You're
take
referring to when Quincy Jones came over from Los Angeles, and we, in America, we were signed to Quincy Jones' label in the 80s and early 90s, and Rob was keen to go with Quincy because Rob used to be a soul DJ before he started managing us, and he was a big fan of Quincy Jones's work. So I think we got all these offers of like vast amounts of money to sign with these record companies. Said no, we're going with Quincy. So Quincy came over to see us in Macclesfield. He'd just been over to see Natasha Kinski, I think, who he just started dating. And on his way back from Germany, he stopped off at Manchester Airport, came to see us, and we went to a little place called Knutsford, which has some connection with King Canute, I believe. And we took him to a restaurant.
It's like Cumbernauld without the joy.
Yeah, it's just a nice little village. And Quincy liked it very much. We had a very nice restaurant, and we became not close friends, but friends. I still, to this day, get a Christmas card of Quincy, which was very nice. He's getting on now.
Listen, let's have people get questions. Put your hands up if you have. Quite a few. If you just hold on, we'll get a mic to you. Take mine.
Bernard, you've played Glasgow many times, and the Barrowlands many times.
Yeah.
Do you remember an instance, around 85 or 86, where you're about to do your silent face, where a pint went sailing through the air, narrowly missing your head, landing on Stephen Morris's cymbal, and you changed the lyrics to "Cunt that never changes remains a stupid twat"?
What do you expect?
Yes. And he actually says, "Make sure there's something in it next time, you twat."
Yeah. I remember that one. Next time it happens, make sure there's something in it. That's a good one, yeah.
It wasn't me, by the way.
Yeah, was it you?
No, it wasn't you.
Right.
I was dancing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's never very pleasant having a pint pot thrown at you, know. I guess it was just enthusiasm, though. It was meant as a sign of goodwill.
It was.
Yeah.
It's gone down in folklore. There's a fantastic bootleg of it as well, but it's fantastic. It is, you should look up on YouTube, Your Silent Face, Barrowlands about 86. It's
Okay,
quite,
I'll check it out. Yeah. I will. Yeah.
Hey Bernard, can you say more about the Technique album? I think for many people that's like ultimately New Order. It captured a time and a place, the Hacienda and so on. Can you just say more about recording Technique and how you feel about that album today?
Yeah, we started writing it at our rehearsal room, which is in a place called Cheat Mill, which is horrible. a gang around there called the Cheating Hillbillies. Do you know the Cheating Hillbillies? Not very nice. We started writing in Cheats Mill, and then Terry Mason, our roadie, and Hockey was sent on a reconnaissance mission to Ibiza. I don't know why really, because it was always a foregone conclusion that we were going to record there. They went out to check the studio over there out, to make sure it was up to our high standards. And the phone rang, and it was like, do you want the good news or the bad news? I'm like, well, give us the bad news. And they went, the studio's absolutely shit. So, okay, what's the good news? Well, they've got a 24-hour bar with a bartender called Herman who can make top cocktails. They've got a swimming pool, and there's a guy at the end of the road who sells things.
No idea what you're talking about.
Neither have I. So went, okay, yeah, all right, book it. So we ended up in Ibiza, and just by luck and good fortune, it was at the time that the Balearic beat, sort of acid house thing was kicking up. Well, we had no idea. We didn't know what Balearic beat was. We know what acid house was because that was kind of happening in Manchester at the Hacienda at the time. So we started writing the album at the rehearsal room, and then stopped writing it when we got to Ibiza because we were just getting fucked up all the time. We'd make a pretense at doing a bit of work in the day, but it was very hot, and then we'd have a siesta. Steve doesn't like the sun, so he did a lot of drums there. And then we'd get Herman the German, who was a bartender. He wasn't German at all, he was Spanish. There's a photograph of him in the book, and we'd like by the swimming pool, swigging cocktails, and then we'd call the guy at the end of the road who sold things, and then we'd start off on the night out and wouldn't get back until possibly really about 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock the next day, and then we'd do the whole thing again. Occasionally we'd get so exhausted we'd have to go in the studio. And when we went in the studio, we wrote a little bit. We wrote Fine Time there, the track Fine Time after a few nights out. And we had a whale of a time, but it was the most expensive holiday I've ever been on in my life. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh, we finished it at Real World Studios in Bath. And there's an interesting story about Real World in the book, because that ended up in a bit of a mess as well. In fact, it ended up in more of a mess than I go into in the book, but for legal reasons I can't tell you the other. Okay? Question?
Do you ever plan on doing anything else as Bad Lieutenant?
When I was in electronic, people used to say, are you going to work with the New Order again? When I was in Bad Lieutenant, people used to say, are you going to work with electronic again? Now I'm in New Order, you're saying. I think it's a natural tendency to want... no, it's a decent question. It's something that did cross my mind today, actually. Possibly, yeah. Possibly. I don't know about gigs, but possibly. Because it was real good fun. Recording that album with electronic, apart from technique that we just gone on about, which was chemically induced fun, that was probably the second most fun album I've made, and that was just purely down to the personnel involved. So possibly, yeah. We did play here in Glasgow.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. I remember introducing, in all innocence, our new nice bass player,
Yeah, Phil Plummer was that as
Tom
well. The
Chapman,
garage.
and jokingly saying he's French, which he is half French. He said he's French, he hates the English, and getting a big rousing cheer from the audience, which I thought, oh yeah, right, I'm in Scotland. Which I thought was funny, actually. I thought it was funny. Tom is half French, but he doesn't like the French, actually. And it's a strange world, with it?
There's no, just in the next row, I think. I'll get you next.
Given
You're
you
not a girl?
No.
I don't think so. Anyway,
No,
you can't
no,
tell these
not
days,
tonight.
can you?
Given your illustrious back catalogue, how does the songwriting process feel? You've got so much expectation on your shoulders. Does it make it more difficult, or does it give you more confidence?
We've been touring so much, and I'm dying to write songs. And I hope that's not a pathetic answer. Touch wood. We've been touring so much. We've been touring constantly on and off for the last 3 years, and being a creative person, the bit I really want to do is write songs. In fact, we've written about 7 or 8 songs that are pretty well finished. Apart from recording, they're only demoed, so we have to now go in the studio, and I'm going in the studio with Steve, Gillian, Tom and Phil. On Monday and Tuesday next week to start completing those songs, and we just need to record them properly. I can tell you that the songs we've written are in a more synthesizer, dance, electronic direction than like past few albums have been, which have been pretty guitar based. Yeah, so no, I'm not scared of writing new songs. I really embrace it because it's what makes me tick. You know, personally, that's the bit I love. Yeah.
Just pass it back, I will.
Hi. So in electronic, you had the opportunity to work with Neil Tennant and Johnny Marr and other great people. What are some people today that you would like to try the same project with?
Oh. I really like Arcade Fire. I think they're fantastic. I really like Killers. I have earlier this year done some live performance with Iggy Pop and Philip Glass, composer, and that was just mind-blowing. We did a concert in New York in aid of a Tibetan charity, a charity that's trying to propagate Tibetan culture and remember Tibetan culture. And I got a letter through the post from Philip Glass asking us to play at the Carnegie Hall in New York, and that was amazing. Amazing. Iggy got up and did Love What Tears Apart, Transmission, and knew all a song called Californian Grass, and it was just great. So I guess that's your answer.
One more question back.
His manager's Scottish, actually. Henry. Yeah, Iggy's manager, Henry. Yeah. I keep calling him Scotch, which I know annoys him. And he knows. He knows that I know that he knows it annoys him.
Hi Barney,
Hi.
big fan. If you had to choose one track,
Yeah.
New Order, and this would say, this is New Order, which track would you choose?
For me, well, it depends. It's a difficult question that, because it depends what mood you're in. But to play live, I really find Temptation.
Whey!
Yeah. And it's a difficult, it's a funny track that, because you can't record it. It's like the elusive butterfly, you know. You can't record it, you can't get it down on record. There's something about it. But when you play it live, it just comes to life. You put it on record, it doesn't, you can't render it properly. But you play it live, and it's a very spiritual song, I think. It's something you can't quite put your finger on, and it's grown from being about 6 minutes long to a 9 minute long rock monster. But Temptation, yeah.
It's quite funny that, because me and my brother grew up together, playing music all the time, to the
Yeah.
extent Mum and Dad are so fed up, they've gone out and bought Substance. Mum plays Temptation all the time. So that's an excellent answer.
Oh, well, maybe it does work recorded. Sounds better live, though. Yeah. I don't know why. It's. And I'm sure if you did a live recording of it, it wouldn't quote. I think it's music of the moment, you know. So, you know, like you get
There you go.
soup of the moment in Ponce restaurants.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. You're more than welcome to come and get your book signed from Bernard. We're going to do that actually, Anton.
So, Natalie, would you like to...
We'll do that, yeah. So you can ask questions as you come up, I'm sure. Ask them about the green bag. Ask them what was inside the green
Oh,
bag.
don't ask about the green bag.
Well, listen, I just wanted to say thanks very much for everyone coming along, and put your hands together and say thank you to Bernard Sumner.